doing a little bit of research before this. Obviously, I read up a little bit. I saw some interviews of you, and I've always thought that I've been around for quite a while. But obviously, you're 10 steps ahead of me. You've been around for forever, and obviously,
well, I'm older than you. I'm a lot older than you. First of
but
all,
still, I feel like I missed out when I hear your stories about the Mirage opening up, the Stardust. I was listening to your interview with the Lockdown Live from April last year. It's super interesting. I try not to do the exact same interview, but I'm still so curious about your story from someone who was there when poker was new to it was so different, obviously, and to the rest of the world. And I was reading, and I had already read that book from Roy the Boy, where you did the introduction, and you said Roy is coming from a family of gamblers, but you weren't from a family of gamblers, right?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't, although like it was my father who took me out to Las Vegas for the first
when
time.
you were 16, huh?
Yeah, but I was I just got obsessed for some reason. That first thing of Vegas, number one, and it was in some ways maybe it was even Las Vegas that I was obsessed with even more than gambling, if that's possible. Las Vegas was such a magical place. So yeah, I was there when I was 16, and then I had a group of high school friends who were kind of equal to me, like obsessed with it, and we went out, the four of us, for a spring break the next year. So just four 17-year-olds out there, and then when I was 18, I spent the summer out there with one of those guys, and probably ended up being in Las Vegas, literally probably ended up being there 20 times or more before I was 21. I just could not get enough of that town.
I know what you mean. I had the same thing, obviously a couple decades later, but still, how did that work? Why did your father all of a sudden, because you were from New Jersey, right? So it wasn't around the corner.
I mean, he 16. Was right. He used to go out there every once in a while. He had an old college buddy who he used to gamble with. My father liked craps. He's not a gambler, but he enjoyed that. It was. I think he kind of thought it would be fun. Bring me out there. There's some stuff to do with his old friend. He didn't actually expect that we would get into the casinos, but like Vegas back then, I mean, it was like so insane. I mean, I had a beard then, and you could just, you just try and look older, put on a crazy clothes, a crazy hat, and sneak in, and they didn't care, back then in Vegas. Obviously, you had to be 21, but the kind of the rule was that they would let you gamble, and then at some point they might say, do you have ID? And you would just say, no, I don't have it on me, but I'm, 25 or 30 or whatever. And then you could just cash your chips and go to the next casino. And like, the strip back then, it was smaller, but it was much more filled because the casinos were smaller. So like between, the Stardust, which I guess when I first arrived in Vegas the first year, Stardust was almost like top of the strip, and there was a couple more out there, Desert Inn and stuff like that. But like there was like you could hit like 15, 20 casinos, just going up and down like that. You can't do that now. First of all, it's so hot, but it just takes you hours to get from one casino, in Vegas. You go out of one casino, it takes you an hour to get to the next one.
You need to take Uber,
Yeah, but they were all over. So we would do that. I mean, my first, couple trips out there, I was always trying to collect a souvenir trip from each casino. I really killed that collection one of those years because I was so broke that I had to go back around to each casino to cash in the dollar chip so I could get to the airport. That happened to me one time. But and it was just every casino had a little bit of a personality. Now the poker back then, like there was no limit. Really, there was no limit. Hold'em didn't really start as a game until, I'd say, until Moneymaker, like you had it was played in the tournaments. Yeah, it was played in the tournaments, but not as a cash game, or maybe it was online. But even the beginning of online poker, it was the limit games. I mean, Paradise Poker was one of the first online poker sites. And that was all limit games, the 10-20, the 20-40 hold'em. Party poker was mostly limit games when they started, and then they started the sit and goes, which were no limit, and then kind of moved on. But when I first went to Vegas, it was like, my buddy and I remember my buddy Sam and and he looked like when I looked like, I think I looked like I could maybe pass for 21. My buddy Sam, when we were 17, he looked like he was 12. I mean, and we walked into the Landmark. I remember. And the Landmark was it was a casino that was between it was kind of like between the Stardust and Las Vegas Hilton. Back then, the Las Vegas Hilton in the 80s, late 80s, sort of, they had the biggest poker room in town before the Mirage opened up. So that was the poker room. But the Landmark was this little place, and we walked in, and there was like the floor man was sitting there, and a dealer was sitting there, and maybe another guy. There was no game going on, and we said, oh, is there a poker game? They're like, yep, just starting one right up. Like,
welcome, sit down.
Yeah, and this is how stupid we were. We did playing like 3-6 limit hold'em with the floor man, a dealer, someone they had gotten over real quick, and someone else. We got smashed. But yeah, that was it. That was it. And it was part poker. Like I didn't really start playing hold'em until we spent the summer out there. I mean, we played it kind of in our we had a little game in my high school, like back in New Jersey, but then we went out there for a summer, and I think at that point I had bought Malmuth and Skalansky's Limit Hold'em book, which you read that now and it feels like it's ancient, but when it came out, it was actually like, it was pretty up there for Limit Hold'em. Back and my buddy Mike and I, we spent an entire summer we graduated high school, or maybe it was the summer after. We spent an entire summer out in Vegas. We took a bus out there, Greyhound bus, one way.
How long did that take you? A Greyhound bus?
Well, he picked me up in Chicago, right? He started on the East Coast, and then Chicago, and it was about Greyhound. It doesn't go direct. You stop every 6 or 8 hours and change buses. But it was probably like 40 something hours, 50 hours, something like that to get out there, And we got there. We both had a couple $100 on us for the summer, and we went to the Stardust. And the Stardust had the greatest poker room of all time in those days. And the reason it was the greatest poker room is because in the early 80s, it had been the biggest poker room in town, late 70s, early 80s. And like maybe 30 tables or something like that, maybe even bigger. But by the time we got out there, like 87, there was maybe 89 when we got out there. By then, the Mirage had opened up, the Las Vegas Hilton had opened up. So the poker room had shrunk. And it was only like maybe 9-10 tables. But all the dealers, right, that had been there, the youngest, they the dealers that kept by seniority. So the youngest dealer had been dealing at the Stardust for 20 years. So like, you have to understand, I mean, if you like characters and like poker history and stuff like that, these were the greatest, the poker dealers at the Stardust, were the greatest bunch of people you would ever meet. And they knew that Mike and I were underage, and they didn't care. They just we're like the mascots. And, they would look out for us a little bit as they could. We had, there was a motor lodge, like a little motel out the back. They had the main hotel and then kind of cheaper rooms out the back. And we got a room there. It was $18 a night. And we split it 3 ways. We picked up another poker player who was out there, this guy named Pookie, who was his own thing like that. He was older than us. Pookie, and me, Mike, and Pookie split this room all summer, $6 each. And then you got a $5 coupon for the snack bar whenever you wanted, or for Toucan Harry's, which was the coffee shop, and $5 for Toucan Harry's could get you like 3/4 of the way to a nice steak, and salad. It was Vegas back then. It was ridiculous, right? And like, it's the greatest summer. That you could not have a better summer than that. Like, your nut is about $10 a day. You're just playing 3-6 Hold'em. It's like the gang of the greatest characters ever. And the players that were there were also incredible characters, because the bigger games, the real games were at the Mirage, the pros were at the Mirage. So it was all kind of the misfits, locals. There were some tourists and a lot of kind of misfit locals that played.
Were you winning?
I won that first summer. Yeah, I won. I did well. I mean, we both won. And
Pookie?
Pookie did not win. Pookie did not win. Pookie had a couple of leaks. I mean,
off the table.
Pookie had some bad leaks. Yeah, he was a wonderful guy though. I mean, I remember this one time he came in the middle of the summer, and it was some story about him getting robbed, like it was probably not a true story. What it wasn't. I mean, like, at a certain point you start to know when you're in Vegas and there's a certain kind of story that's not true. But yeah, Pookie was awesome. I won. They used to have this thing at the Stardust back then. It was a weekly tournament. And it was played in the cash game, so it wasn't a tournament, but they would keep track of how much everyone won and lost during the whole week, and then it was like in this 3-6 Hold'em game, which was the game, and the first prize was, I think the first prize was $1,000. It might have been 500, but I think it was 1,000, which was a lot. Like, you're playing 3-6 Hold'em, but because obviously, something like that, people are going to try and cheat and stuff like that. So because of that, in the 3-6 Hold'em at the Stardust, red chips or anything bigger than a white chip, which is a $1 chip, was not allowed. So that you couldn't put chips on the table and stuff like that, and they could keep track. And so you were playing like this. I don't know if you can picture this, but 3-6 Hold'em with all white chips. Now, the Stardust also back then, it was crazy, and most places allowed either a bet and 3 raises or bet and 4 raises. Stardust was a bet and 5 raises at all times. So which is totally different. So, and it was just, the games were nuts. So you'd be playing 9-handed. It would always be 18 before the flop, 18 on the flop, and all white chips. And so people would be sitting there, and then you couldn't turn it into money. Right. So everybody would have like $600-700 in chips in front of them, all white. So it was like, this is like incredible. Some people would like stack racks at the side of their chair. Some people would build towers, and the games would just go on forever, and we're 19 years old. I mean, this is the greatest thing ever. You're playing in these games and everyone's like, bum, 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 bum. And then the pots are like this, all white chips. And that was it. Right. And yeah, so there was one week when I won that tournament. Won the weekly thing, and that was the biggest thing I had ever won. 19 years old, and then there was one week where Mike, my buddy Mike, he was ahead. He was pretty far ahead going into the last day. And everyone's like, don't play. They have to catch you. And it's really stressful, It's always all his money, really. So he can't sleep. He's got to hang around the poker room, can't play. Hopefully no one's going to catch him. And someone went on a run, and Mike himself, he had to go in with like 5 hours to go. The guy caught him, and now Mike had to go in. He's been up for a day and a half. It was like that kind of, it was just madness. Mike did not win that. in the end. It was terrible. But like that was us. So that was our summer, and we were across
Were you the
street.
one that got your friends into gambling? Because you've been to Vegas with your father, but I imagine your friend. Where did your other friends get the bug for gambling, poker, and whatnot?
We just started playing. We were all kind of equal. I mean, I was certainly not the best of us, right? There was four of us. One of my buddies, Mike, became quite a good pro. And another one of my buddies, John, he was a pro for a while in Atlantic City. He just didn't like it. But yeah, I was certain. I don't know. It was maybe we were all just kind of, the same. That first trip out to Vegas, I brought back a World Series of Poker magazine. God, I probably got it here somewhere. They used to put out these like glossy, I don't know if you've ever seen them. In the old days, they used to publish these kind of glossy magazines with
Yeah, with the photos of all the players and stuff.
Yeah, with the photos of all the players and the nicknames and everything. And that was just like, I mean, I still remember them all, like Seymour Leibowitz, the cigar, Don Adams, the best unknown player, Bobby the Owl Baldwin, and the picks Johnny, Orient Express Chan, all that stuff. And so it was just, I don't know, that lore really attracted me, and then like, when I was out there a couple of years later, I started to get to see a lot of those guys, not play with them, although I did play with Johnny Moss, which was, one of the greatest, things ever, I mean, he was ancient, but he was a real old. I mean, Johnny, you think like the Doyle Brunson is an old timer. I mean, Johnny Moss was an old timer when Doyle Brunson was like 21. That's how, Johnny Moss is like insane, right?
But you played with him, and at one point, well, maybe not Johnny Moss, but you got to know all of the players, right? I mean,
a certain group of them, like, there's obviously some. I met at different times, like, there's a certain group of kind of old timers where I would almost say like I came up with them, because I really started to play a lot when Atlantic City started, right? When they legalized poker, even though I'd been in Vegas and stuff like that and knew some of the old timers there. But like I used to play an enormous amount with like a guy named John Hennigan, right? So I know him quite well, from kind of like those early days. But and he's a real incredible. He was a big time player,
Johnny
right?
World
Player, yeah, Johnny World. But guys like Negreanu and Helmuth, who I did become friendly with, and I became friendly with them probably later once the TV poker and stuff started, if you'd say I didn't, I wasn't in there, what wasn't in there or like, back then, but
can you tell a little bit how you experienced the shift, I guess you could call it, from cash games to tournaments, where obviously tournaments all of a sudden that is how people keep track of who's the best, sort of say, and you obviously, I've read a lot about it, so you don't have to rehash everything, but obviously you became the voice of poker, but on this side of the Atlantic, but that was a tournament where you went to play, right, and you busted out with the 9-3. I read all about it, but that was already a shift, because it was a 1500 tournament and you weren't a tournament player.
No, but I was barely a poker player at that time, to be honest with you. I mean, it was easier for me than a lot of people to realize that I wasn't that good, shall we say. I don't know why. I mean, I've frankly, I was never that. I didn't have that talent. I loved it. but I did not have the talent, and I did not have maybe the work ethic to get better. And so even by I always took a lot of breaks. I was quite lucky in my early years, was making money, but I'd say by 96, 97, I knew that, I was not really going to make a living at poker, right? And I was looking for other things. I mean, by that, by 97, I was thinking I was going to be an author and that kind of thing. I wanted to be a writer. So, and write about gambling. So even back then, and so even going to the, this tournament where I started doing commentary, it was really, I'll go there because it might open up some opportunities like that. But the shift from tournaments to tournaments, that didn't happen. And I mean, it was moneymaker, frankly. Like I know we had it was maybe, what, it wasn't, I don't want to say it was not moneymaker, but it was online poker, right? And it was probably, poker stars. I mean, Paradise Poker, like I used to go to the World Series when I had a lot of money, for me, when I was doing really well, playing high stakes, maybe like, in the early 90s, I would go out to Las Vegas quite frequently, and I was out there during the World Series, and I would just play the cash games. I wasn't interested. Barry Greenstein, he was a very late convert to tournaments, and he used to have this. He used to just always say, look at the tournament players, they're all broke. The only guys that have money are cash game players. And throughout the 90s, he would have been 100% correct. Like, even a lot of the really good tournament players would have had trouble staying in money. There wasn't enough tournaments, I mean, 100 reasons, the cash game players they were the ones who had the money, right? The successful ones. But once the internet started, that all changed. And Paradise Poker, they wanted to be the poker site that didn't have tournaments, which is probably one of the reasons why you don't hear about them anymore. But Poker Stars, when they started with those MTTs, I mean, like, it was, like, that changed the world, right? That changed the world. And it was Poker Stars, you had Ladbrokes, you had Party, and then those guys started going to Vegas, and then so yeah, it was Moneymaker, but Moneymaker was part of that. Moneymaker came off the internet, was an MTT player, so you just had all of a sudden people wanting to play live MTTs all over the place. And I mean, like the early TV poker, late night poker, that was a sit and go. It was no limit, but it was a sit and go. But those first years, I mean, when I was writing about poker, I was out there. I probably had 6, 7, or 8 years in a row where I spent the entire summer at the World Series and not playing, just either writing or doing one thing or another.
When you're writing or looking at it from a TV perspective, a tournament has the narrative, right? Everyone starts and there's one winner. There's basically a set time. Did you see that the tournament would take over from the cash game in that sort of sense to the outer world? People thinking of poker nowadays obviously think about the big tournament winners. Nobody thinks about who's grinding it out in Bobby's room. Well, maybe Bobby's room is an exception, but in general, did you see that right away? Is that why you jumped to late night poker and saw like maybe this opened something up?
I don't know. I mean, you certainly saw it. You certainly saw it in Vegas. You certainly saw it in Vegas. I mean, I was like even like 2001, 2002. Those were great years at Binion's, and great. The tournaments were getting bigger. And there was a couple online qualifiers there, but still a lot of cash games, right? A lot of and the schedule was kind of smaller, and no one would have considered, I'm just going to play all the tournaments. but yeah, as soon as like, you know, you had the moneymaker and then you came back the next year, 2004 was in Binions. And I mean, literally, you know, that 2004, they went from one starting day to two in 2004, and they still were seating 11 at a table, and they had tables outside on Fremont Street. I remember my buddy Scott Gray, who got he got second in 2002, and in 2004 he was sitting, you know, outside the fire with a table that was like half in, half outside, 11 handed outside the fire. It was just like, it was nuts, you know.
Did you welcome that? Did you love it? Because obviously there were people that thought like, you know, the way things were at Binions was the way it was supposed to be, and when it moved to the Rio, it lost its soul. When Caesars took over, it lost its soul. Now it's going to move maybe to Bali's next year, or maybe they might rename it to the Horseshoe. But you know, what were your thoughts? Because you saw
all
that.
All of us when we get older, you know, think the old days were better. I mean, like, you know, come on. I mean, that's human nature. Like there was some unbelievable, like the thing about Binions, it's not me thinking so much about the poker, it's the atmosphere. You know, there used to be this, you know, for the Europeans, like for the people who are Americans, like Binions was the greatest place in the world. You know, you had this huge sort of double horseshoe bar at Binions, and there one side was like called the Irish bar, and the other side was called the English bar, and everybody was there 24 hours a day. You know, that was the place, you know, and it was, and you know, when I started coming to Europe, I actually came over quite early. I mean, I was playing in the not only the Holland casino, but what was the place that opened up the 24-hour? I don't know if you remember, there was a place that opened up
in Holland,
like we're in 95, Concord. Was it? No. There was a place that opened up in just kind of on the outside of town in 95. That was a 24-hour room. They had a big tournament there. And you know, so, but even like back then, I mean, it was all the guys would hang out at the bar together. You know, I remember the place I met Surinder Sunar. Now I met him in late night poker, but Surinder Sunar was, he was like total VIP at the Holland Casino.
Oh yeah, even when I started at the Master Classical Poker, Surinder Sunar was the biggest name.
He would get in the tournaments, main event, he had table one, seat one. He got that, okay? And he had a little corner, you know, they had a horseshoe bar in Holland, they probably still have it, Holland bar too. And I remember
they don't have it anymore.
Okay, you're killing me. You're killing me. But like I remember, you know, because I used to go to the Master Classics a lot. I mean, the Master Classics was, I think the first year I was there was probably 95 or 96. I remember it well because I had traveled, my wife and I had traveled around Asia for 9 months backpacking, and we went nearly everywhere in Asia, got back to Copenhagen where she lived. I flew to Amsterdam to start to go to the master class. I hadn't played poker in over a year. Went into the Holland Casino. There was I want to think it was like 3,000, 6,000 FLs or something. It was a big game. It was kind of the equivalent of like, you know, 200, 400 limit or something like that. Jumped in this game. It was the first time I ever met Donica O'D. I'm sure Rob Huddink, old Rob. He won a Euro. Yeah, Rob Hollink. He was in there, you know, a bunch of guys from Georgia. I lost more in that game that first night than we had spent on the entire 9 months traveling through Asia. And that was there. But there's like a lot of guys to see there. But anyway, so I used to always go to the Master Classics still, but those early days, I always remember, you know, being with Surinder at that horseshoe bar, which he owned it. He had his little kind of corner staked out. And he had this saying he used to say to me, Jesse, it's okay. It's okay as long as you drink. It's okay as long as you can stand up. But if you fall down, you gotta go home. And he said, you're allowed to hold on to the bar if you want. And that would be it. He would just sit. We would sit there. He would feed me drinks until I fell down, and then I had to go home. Surinder, who could drink quite a lot, he never fell down.
That's a good thing to have. I've always, like you, I've visited tournaments all over the world. I always like tournaments that are set in one place where there's one bar and there's not a whole, because everyone gathers there. That's why I always liked EPT Copenhagen a lot as well, because everyone was at that bar downstairs because there wasn't a whole lot, to do. Everyone's staying in the same hotel rooms upstairs. I love those.
100%. And I mean, like, sure, poker tournaments are competitive. The cash games are competitive, but you can be civilized. You're allowed to have drinks and hang out and these are the kind of people you want to share stories with anyway. That you want there. It's always Europe is always an incredible place to hang out, and I totally agree with you. When there's a bar and people to hang out, it's the best.
I listened to an interview yesterday from you. I don't know, or I read it, but you have been always obviously in love with poker, but also in love with the environment of being in the world of gambling and poker, right? It wasn't just the game itself, but it was the stories, the experiences, right?
Totally. I mean, I like to say a people watcher. I really enjoy watching people. And poker and gambling is the best environment for that. And all kinds of people, right? So yeah, that's why whenever I was writing about poker, I mean, there's the original poker journalist. Well, there was a couple of them. There was a guy named Mike Pauly, and there was a guy named Andy Glazer. I think in some ways they were kind of the two big ones when I first started writing about poker. And they would kind of cover the World Series. Andy Glazer used to have these yellow legal pads, and he would basically just write, sit at the side of the final tables and just basically write a transcript of every hand, and Mike Pauly would kind of write, kind of stories about that with the knockout hands. And I just wasn't into that. It just wasn't, I don't know. It just wasn't interesting to me. I used to always be like, I had a couple of things, like little tricks that I did for my stories. I was only interested in, things happening between midnight and 8 a.m. I don't if I'm in Vegas, I'm not going anywhere before midnight. I want to see people that have been playing all day and all night, and wheels are off.
And that's what I was getting at as well, because the bar is the best place, right? To hang out with the people, have a drink, maybe not falling down is one thing, but oh man, I love that time.
You get all your stories there. Yeah. I'll tell you, I was covering, I remember when I was covering I think it was probably 2003 actually, when I was in Vegas. And I had this thing, because the main event is kind of tough to cover. Like, you can get inside, but you can't see much. So I was all about the breaks, and I would alternate, every 2 hours there'd be a break. And so, one break, I'd always go out to the smoking area where everyone would, be out the same thing, because you get all the stories there. Or I'd go into the bathroom, which, may sound kind of perverted, but like that was where it would also go. So I'd be in there. So I remember this one time when I've followed Phil Ivey into the bathroom on a break, and he was, and I got a great conversation with, he was having with like Howard Lederer, and stuff like that. But that was what I used to, like to do.
Every now and then, obviously, a lot of the stuff that I read, your interviews is about late night poker. But I still want to talk about one hand in specifically the quads over quads hand, because I wouldn't say
Toby Lewis.
It was one of the things that I remember vividly. That, I mean, I was already deep into poker, but that hand really, that was just amazing at the time already. And it was Andrew Roble, obviously, versus Toby Lewis. How did you? Can you remember anything?
Oh yeah,
Because you were in the booth with Sexton and Locke.
Yeah, I mean that. Like you just said it right there. How am I going to forget being in the booth with Sexton and Locke? So I mean, one of the probably the greatest thing about getting to do all those Matchroom shows that I did was that we did a lot of rotating commentaries, right? So they would just throw anybody, like a lot of times they just didn't want to pay a second commentator, so they just throw anybody else in, which I loved. I mean, like I love obviously doing. Anytime I could do commentary with Parkinson, that was that's just like the greatest ever. But beyond that, it would be about picking the brains of all the other great poker players. So you got to do a lot. But that tournament was at the Palm Beach, which was not where we usually did poker tournaments for TV. The Palm Beach is in a really nice part of London. It's a very upscale casino. And so it was a little bit special there. Excuse me. And I think it was one of the first times that I ever did commentary with Mike Sexton and also Phil Locke. Right, I got to do with both of them after, but I think that may have been like the first time. So and it was one of those kind of like casual things, where like Phil Locke is, one of my favorite people, just a character of all time. And Mike Sexton, one of my heroes. Mike Sexton had been a hero of mine since I was, literally since I was like 22, 23, and then Locke, I met at Late Night Poker, one of the last seasons, and then just kind of became, as you do, you become totally obsessed with him. He's an amazing character. But so I can't remember. I think it was like me and Mike doing commentary, and Mike probably almost had to do it that first time because he was sponsored by a party. And then Phil Locke would have just been wandering by and been like, "Oh, I'll get in. Come on, it's like fun," like that sort of thing. So we'd all be there, and then that tournament was one of those tournaments when you were doing like 2 long heats a day. So it'd be like, 2 sit and goes. It'd be like 14 hours. You'd start the first one at 10 in the morning, and the second one wouldn't end till 2 in the morning or something like that. And then you'd go home and then come back and do it again. So that one I think was quite late. It was quite late at night when that happened. And like Toby Lewis was a real. He was a guy back then who everyone knew was fantastic, but not an enormous amount of people knew about him. I mean, he'd won, he probably won either an EPT or WPT by then, and he was playing a lot of those Matchroom sit and goes and totally tearing it up online, but it was probably before he became who
household
he is
name
now, which is just power guy. I mean, he's lives out in the States and is just insane. So he was probably at that table. I mean, who was at that table? I mean, I think Trickett was at that table, Robles at that table, was John Duffy at that table,
Helpy
was you? Yeah, of course you. I was in the middle. Yeah. You was at the table. So Toby would have not, been considered like, he was a little bit, I don't want to say not at all, but like, yeah, he was not the main name there at that time, right? Like he would be now. And Roble, that was the very first time he had played on one of the Matchroom events. So the first time I had ever, and I knew obviously all about him.
That was in the time of Victory Poker, where they were with Dan Bazarian blowing up stuff in the desert. The bad boys of poker. Yeah.
Well, it was also probably just prior or. I don't remember what year it was, but it was probably only a year or two prior to the time when Roble started playing in the really, really big games in Macau,
Mm.
What she was doing. But so I was really excited to see him. I mean, he was he was one of those guys who I've heard incredible things about him, like as a person, like a really friendly guy, but he's not the kind of person you warm to right away. He,
No.
seems a little standoffish, like
American.
Yeah, right.
In
Well,
that
yeah, I
lineup.
mean, maybe. I mean, like, yeah, but he's I know he's got a big sense of humor because I've seen him a lot of cash games, and I've heard funny stories about him, and I know he's quite, he is, quite cool and got a sense of humor. But he was a little bit standoffish then. So when he was there, because like Dwan was there, and this was right around the same time when Dwan was doing all the crazy stuff, and I think Sammy George was involved in that tournament. I know he was, actually. It was when so there was a lot of it was really like when things were starting to take off. So that's how Robo would have come over, probably gotten a nod from Dwan or something. I mean, I'm trying to remember how we invited him. There was also like other guys who were in that tournament for the first time, like
Timoshenko.
No, yeah, couldn't have been Timoshenko's first go. No, Timoshenko played a lot. I love Timoshenko. Oh, I love Timoshenko. He's awesome. Timoshenko played in our Premier League. He played lots and lots. Anyway, so that hand, so like there was a lot of dynamics at that table, and in fact, I wouldn't have even had my eye totally on Toby Lewis back then. I was all about Trickett. Trickett won that tournament. He was awesome. That was right when Trickett was just starting to become awesome. He was kind of like a totally unknown, before then. I mean, hold on, when was that? Was it 2011? Is that possible?
I think 2011, yeah. It's the World Poker Open.
2011. So, yeah, if it was 2011, yeah. So because I think I spent the summer of 2010 out in Vegas with Trickett. So I would have known him quite well, and I really, really admired the way Trickett played. So it was big.
I mean,
but yeah,
2012, obviously, Sam Trickett finished runner-up for 10 million.
Yeah,
but yeah. So it was. Yeah,
but
it was already
anyway,
a name. Yeah.
So if it was 2000, the reason I'm kind of thinking is because that was right around the time. See, there was a time when there was, there was a lot of guys going out to Macau to play really, really big stakes poker. Guys like Gus and Dwan and Trickett and Ivy and Robles. That there was, and so that's it was. If it was 2011, then it was that was the time, right? And so there was all kinds of stuff going on. Because those guys who they play with in Macau, they also would have started coming over to London, and it was all like part of the whole that was the beginning of that scene. I mean, as you know, this is it became that tour where there was a lot of big tournaments all over, and GG Poker. I mean, like it's all it's all connected, right? When the guys from Macau started getting into poker, and then started up the million and everything from that, right? So so that was and then that hand, I mean, like the hand just happened, it just happened like any other hand, and I just sat there and laughed my head off with Sexton and
but
Locke.
You all three basically would say, like, if he raises here, that is a mistake, that's a terrible play. And what does Lewis do? He raises with the quads. Oh man. I thought 3 was too much. That was too much in as a commentary team, but during that hand I loved it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's like the thing is that Matchroom and they always insisted on poker filming it like a sport, and now part of that was for economic reasons, but almost even back then, and maybe even now, almost every single poker show that would made it to TV would film and then put the commentary in afterwards, cut the show, put the commentary in afterwards. And we always did it live. So, you know, when you're in there for like 12-hour days and stuff like that, it is fun to have three guys. And yeah, it might be a lot, way too much talking, but in terms of in terms of like enjoying it from our point of view, yeah. And yeah, it's very, like, sometimes the commentary is very sloppy. I mean, I listen back to that old stuff and I'm, you know, always be like, Jesse, shut up, you know. But I'd be on the coffee, you know. I'd have drank like I am now, you know. I've got some Honduran coffee here, but I'd have drank, you know, 2 venti or 3 venti Starbucks, and you know, I was just having fun. You couldn't have shut me up if you had gagged me, you know. We're just having the crack, you know. Not even really thinking about making it a good TV show, you know.
What do you think about poker on TV these days? I mean, PokerGo is basically, you know, they've been buying up all the content, and they have, you know, what they have, obviously, but it's different than it was back then. But do you still like it? Do you follow poker on TV right now?
Some of it. I haven't watched PokerGo, and I probably should. I mean,
the newest season of High Stakes Poker. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it yet. I will. I always watch the World Series if I can. I mean, like, you know, even the last couple of years, if the World Series, and see, here's the difference, right? I would I'd rather watch something live with no cards than on a half-hour delay with cards. So I have this real, I feel like TV poker is just missing a trick, right? And that everyone is so obsessed with, if we don't see the cards, it's not a show. And because of that, it's like losing touch with, is it a sport? Is it a game? You know, you gotta have, it's gotta be live. I know a half-hour delay seems like nothing, but to me it's everything, right? I hate the final table of the World Series where you see, like, the guys are at the table and then the hand finishes and they all rush off to the rail to find out what everybody had a half hour ago. It's like, it's insane. It's like, what's going on? Like, and that's kind of happening all over. So, you know, for me, one of two things has to change, right? You know, either, like, we have to change the game, meaning that if everybody just turned their cards over at the end of the hand, we wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. You know, even the guys that folded, if you just saw what everybody had, it would all be live and you can all engage live, or just forget about it. Like I just think there's this, you know, and so because of that, what you got, you know, TV poker, but it's packaged. It's not a sport. It's not like, you know, anyway, you know, I that's just me. Like, it's not like I hate what's going on. It's like I just can't get over it, that I feel like it's holding poker back, you know.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm not 100% sure if I agree, but yeah, it's definitely
Have you ever been in the audience of the final table at the World Series?
Of course, I've been to all the November 9s.
Yeah,
it's definitely a different vibe. Everyone's running around, especially, you know, I was there when Kenny Hollard made the final table, and
of course you were. Yeah, that was good.
And
good for him.
And he was talking to Fedor Holtz in the audience, obviously between every other hand. Yeah, it's a different vibe for sure. But, you know, there's so much money at stake. I understand what they're doing.
Yeah, but it's like, it takes away from the festival. I mean, because of that, like, you know, I think you're flip whether it's better to watch it in the audience or just, you know, sit at home and watch it on the computer. You know, you don't. It's not the exact same vibe. But yeah, I mean, that must have been awesome. What a run Kenny had, huh? I guess he's almost still having it, you know.
Yeah, you still love that. Do you still follow everything around poker? Because you obviously, you've migrated, or you're more towards matchroom and sports betting. But do you still keep track of everything around poker? Because obviously, it's kind of sad, but when someone dies, there's always at least a thread from you with personal notes. So I know you keep track of what's
I
going
know
on.
all the guys who die. That's for sure.
It's very sad. Sorry to put it that way, but obviously that's why I'm answering my own question. I know that you keep track, but are you still into poker?
Like Twitter, my Twitter feed is all poker. I mean, yeah, I love it. There's no way I followed as closely as I used to, right? I mean, like, I used to be able to, I could name every single World Series of Poker champion in order, no sweat, and probably most of the guys at every final table. And now I'm kind of like, who won it last year? What was his, who won it 2 years ago? I mean, like, like it's just a little bit, little bit more, it's not the same, but of course I follow it, and I'm probably in that sort of bad place of following the guys that I used to know, not as much as the new guys. Although, when like you asked, like, do I watch Poker Go? Like, I didn't watch Poker Go, but I watch Twitch, like I do. Like, I think Twitch, and that's and I know, yeah, Twitch is a 5-minute delay too, but it's a little bit different. I think Twitch is great. I watch JD Staples. I was watching Feeder Holtz, like, recently was playing a bunch of 25K buy-ins on Twitch. That was insane. Will I watch Negreanu and Polk? Yeah, I'm gonna watch Negreanu and Polk. I mean, like I'm in for that. I'm in for that stuff. Like,
who if, like, maybe not Matchroom, but like whatever, Party Poker or Poker Stars, whoever says, Jesse, please help us. We want to film a good TV show. Who do you want to invite to the table? Do you have the names on top of your head right now?
Probably not. Oh, probably not. No, because I mean, like, who wants to watch a bunch of, everyone doesn't exactly want to watch, a bunch of guys who were famous 5 years ago. I mean, who do I think? Who are my favorite TV personalities? I can tell you, if that's the question, I can tell you. I mean, Phil Locke is one of the greatest TV personalities for poker of all time. Tony G, 100%. Phil Hellmuth, just money. He's always money. And then, as far as like guys who you just, because their play is just so insanely awesome that you want to watch them. Yeah, I mean, I'm an Ivy fan. I mean, the newer guys, I mean,
well, you said Doc Polk, right? He's a character.
Yeah,
no,
he's not my cup of tea. I have to be honest with you. He's not my cup, but I don't have anything against him. I mean, he's an unbelievable player. I mean, so I did watch, like, for instance, a couple of years ago, there was Man Against the Machine. I don't think it was Hulk, but it was like Jason Less and all the best, absolute best no limit hold'em players. And I watched nearly all of that. They got beat.
Pretty badly.
But I watched. That was there's this young kid, Don, what was his name? He was awesome. He was awesome. I used to watch all of that. So, like, I do like the really good no limit, hold'em players. Those heads up guys. But like sometimes I struggle with their names these days. I mean, like I was always a Luke, like I feel like I just sound like, such a, an old timer when I just, try on these names of Helmut and Schwartz. But the truth
they're
is,
still good.
Like,
they're still good for TV. So
they're good, but poker is like, poker got solved, man. I mean, like, I don't know if you haven't heard, but poker got solved. Like,
well, basically, live poker
like,
hasn't.
No, and like it's still a great game, and it's incredible and stuff like that. But I mean, like,
are
I do
you going to
follow
visit the World Series? If it's happening in November, let's say. Well, you're obviously an American, so you can travel whatever you want. But would you?
I won't be going this year. I won't be going this year. But yeah, I mean, of course, I always love to go to the World Series, and
and why are you ruling out going this year?
Because I'm just not into traveling right now.
Fair enough.
Like it's just not part of the way I'm thinking. I don't want to impose all my political or pandemic views
no.
It's just not my gig right now. I've done a lot of traveling, and it's just not something I'm looking at right now.
You like Denmark? It's Copenhagen, right?
I lived in Copenhagen. My wife and I lived in Copenhagen for like 20 years, and then just last year we moved out a little bit more to the country, so suburb type of place, which has been great as well. But yeah, I love Denmark. I've only got good things to say about Denmark, and these last 2 years have particularly it's been a great. Felt
do
like
you speak Danish?
Well,
no.
I'm a lot better. For having been here 20 years, my Danish is embarrassing. But it's not that bad. It's not as good as my son's. How about that? My Danish is not as good as my son's.
Fair enough.
And he's only 7, right? But I'm decent. I'm not bad. I can have a bad conversation, but not a lot of good ones.
Fair enough. I mean, we could talk for hours, but I have one more question for you, and then I guess we need to wrap it up. It's almost weekend. I need a beer. I don't know about you, but
yeah.
What is the best gambling movie in the world, and why is it Uncut Gems?
Oh my God, that's strong. That's strong. I'm gonna tell you something that is gonna make you hate me, which is that worse than not having seen Uncut Gems, I actually have only seen half of it.
And you quit, or you fell asleep, or you couldn't stand it because it's so anxiety inducing?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to finish it next week. I'm going to go back and finish it next week. It's funny because there is a couple people that have said something like that, like, oh my God, it's one of the greatest movies ever. And I was like, yeah, why did I stop watching halfway through? I can't exactly remember. But yeah, I'll go back. I mean, I can't remember.
Please. This is a character. Obviously, it's a movie, but you've seen people like this that are constantly messing up because they need that gamble, and it's anxiety inducing, and that's what we know as well from poker, gambling, putting it all on the line. And this is the movie that I feel. I mean, obviously Rounders is my favorite poker movie, one of my favorite movies of all time, but Uncut Gems just captures that feeling of anxiety when you're constantly playing for all you got and messing with evils that you shouldn't be messing with. If people ask me like what is gambling like, I would say just watch that movie and you see it. I'm there.
Maybe that's probly why I turned it off. It was just a little painful for me, and I was
too close to home.
Yeah, I was maybe just a little bit sick in my stomach and wasn't like ready to, not in the mood to take that on. I was, oh great, Adam Sandler movie, but you know, it's there's a lot of different kinds of Adam Sandler movies.
But what is your favorite gambling movie?
I mean, if I'm a Cincinnati Kid, man. I mean, now it's funny because like I've seen the Cincinnati Kid. Sorry, I've seen the Cincinnati Kid maybe 100 times, you know, and genuinely, because not only do I love it, I used to watch it, but it used to be like one of the only gambling movies that was on this channel called TCM. And it used to just always go on at weird times, so I'd always like get to see it. I read the book and stuff, and I just always assumed that everybody thought it was like it's not really just about the movie or the story. It's because there's so many actors in it that I absolutely adore, and there's this great I love New Orleans. There's incredible New Orleans shots of that. But I remember, like, I just always thought that everybody thought it was the greatest ever. And I knew there were some people I was like, you haven't seen it. But this guy, Brian Koppelman, who wrote Rounders, who I know a little bit, like not well, but I know a little bit. And I got into a conversation with him on Twitter, like just a quick one or something, where I made some comment about the Cincinnati Kid, like obviously it's the greatest or something like that. And like the way he came back, I just knew instantly that among real movie people, the Cincinnati Kid is just considered just kind of like trite and worthless and cheesy, and the dialogue's no good and all this stuff. And like, that's just not the way I see it at all, but like, everybody's got their own, everybody's got their own. I mean, for me, the Cincinnati Kid, there's a couple of scenes in there which I would just describe as perfect. For me, they're just perfect scenes. The movie kind of, is this and that, but
all right. I have seen it obviously, but it's been a while. I'm gonna rewatch that one. You take a look at Uncle Jim's whenever it's.
I am. Don't worry, I'll be there. I'd almost rather if you'd ask me my favorite gambling book, because I can give you a gambling book that a lot of people don't know about.
What is it?
It's called Fast Company by John Bradshaw. Do you know it?
No. I'm Googling it right now.
That's the one. That's the one. And that is probably, I would say probably the most, for some reason, underappreciated. It's profiles of professional gamblers.
Johnny Moss, Puggy Pearson, Titanic Thompson. I'm looking at it right now. I'm gonna order it. Yeah.
It's great. It's great. I mean, it's been a couple of years since I read it. There's a profile of a professional golf hustler in there that's I've never even heard of, but it's great. There's a line in there that it's just one of my favorite lines from a novel of all time. And there's a scene in there. This golf hustler, he's young and he's involved in some kind of match, and he's with a fish, big whale. And then this other golf hustler who he hasn't realized, he thought that this guy is such a good hustler that he thought this guy was just a big fish for a long time, And then they get to this, the match is really big. This guy's kind of watching. The other two are playing a massive match, and it gets to some shot, and this guy, he makes a shot that he kind of gives the game away to him. I mean, no one could ever make the shot. He's made it. They've just tripled the stakes, and he's made this shot. And then the match finishes, and he says something to the guy, and the guy says, for a smart guy, it sure took you a long time to figure it out. Like, yeah. And which is like hustling. It's like that's. There's a lot about that with like gambling and hustling. Like you'll think something's going on, you're not really sure. And then like eventually you realize that what you thought about this guy wasn't true, or you thought about this guy wasn't true. You start suddenly see what's really going on in a gambling situation, and you'd be like, geez, that took me a while to figure that one out, like that kind of thing,
Hustling is something I have always admired. Actually, sometimes obviously it gives a little. It doesn't have a little bit of a bad name or a bad intonation sometimes, but hustling, that is to me, that is, I love it. When I started with poker, everyone obviously was telling stories about Phil Ivey, how big of a gambler he was off the poker tables, obviously baccarat and craps and whatnot. But I think that was all image building, and then he got. Well, obviously he didn't get away with it, but he got to the place where the casino would give him the cards that he wanted. And I have nothing but respect. That is a hustle, and that is obviously, cheating and all that stuff. I mean, that's part of the world that we're in.
I'm totally with you, and there's a lot of gray, but,
angle shooting, I don't like. I mean, some people admire it, but hustling, I love it. I'm gonna read the book.
Good. Yeah. Okay. I'm glad to hear it. It's worth it if you like that world.
$6.95 on Amazon. I see. All right. I'm gonna wrap it up. Thanks a lot. I mean, obviously you didn't have to do this. I love talking to you. I'd love to talk to you again sometime. Maybe when Matchbook comes to Holland one day, we'll have a catch up. You tell me what you thought of Uncut Gems in full. I'll tell you what I think now of Cincinnati Kid and Fast Company, and we'll see each other then.
Sounds good, Frank. Good luck, and thanks for listening to me. I'm not allowed to talk in my house because nobody wants to hear me anymore. So I mean, this has been a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks. Say hi to Mickey from me, and hopefully we'll catch up one day either through Zoom or on some sort of live tournament. You never know.
Anytime. Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right. Nice one, man.